Right, YouTube, it's Shadow King Nazu. I'm here with my review of Kong Skull Island. Now, I just saw with my dad yesterday. We went to the 3D version because it was more convenient for us at the time. Do well things I don't feel the really need to get into. It's nothing bad or controversial, but it was just like best word I say, it's just inconsequential and not really relevant. So let's get into the review, shall we? Now, Kong Skull Island is the second movie of this MonsterVerse. Not to be confused with the Universal Monster Cinematic Universe, which is going to feature like the Mummy, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, what have you. This MonsterVerse is going to feature kaiju, and like I said, it's the second one, with the first one being Godzilla. Though I should say it's more like the Captain America of the MonsterVerse, as opposed to taking place after Godzilla, it takes place before Godzilla, back in the Vietnam War. So the story is that Monarch is trying to prove to the government that monsters do exist, so they can continue getting funding for their projects. Uh, on studying monsters and learning how to deal with them, whether they be allies or enemies. So the government wants proof that they are actually does monsters do exist, and not just subjective evidence like a ship being destroyed, despite there being giant claw marks from Godzilla. But whatever. And they decided to hire some military people and expert tracker, and brought along a photographer who ironically is against war to help them get the evidence on Skull Island, which is this uncharted island until now. And that's where they start meeting the inhabitants of Skull Island, such as Kong, some giant water buffaloes, a giant spider, um, the skull crawlers. Did I say that already? Whatever. And many other indigenous creatures. And there's all of them trying to survive and try to get back home with what they know about this. So let's get into the. I do feel that this story did take an interesting take on this story, as most people try to make it into a Beauty and the Beast story, like the classic King Kong, with such examples being the 2005 Peter Jackson's King Kong, which was a remake of it. Whereas this movie tries to focus more on Kong being more action focused and more about the focus of uh, Kong's Island and how he rules it. And I feel this was much more. This was like a breath of fresh air, as we're not seeing the same story over and over again. And it does make sense to go this route because at the end of the original Kong and so many that try to follow its story, that Kong dies to a bunch of Halo bullets. While this one is supposed to cross over with Godzilla, and if he's going to fight Godzilla and or potentially become an ally of Godzilla, which is part of what I'm hoping to. But if he doesn't, I'm on Team Godzilla. This Kong's going to have to take more than bullets, and it's going to have to get significantly bigger. Because despite this Kong being quite a capable fighter and quite intelligent for an ape, he does have his weaknesses, such as anything like helicopter ammunition. I think 50 caliber bullets can harm him and any Skull Island monsters at this point. So I think by the time I think about the time when they get to meeting Godzilla, he's going to need to build up his endurance. And there's a lot of people who were wondering if Kong had any special abilities, like he had lightning powers like he did in the original King Kong versus Godzilla. So far, it does not seem so. So I think he's just brute strength and intelligence. But a lot of things can change in when did Vietnam happen? 1976. So a lot of things can happen in about 41 years, or 40 plus years, as it were. But all in all, I do say that I do like this King Kong. It's still an intelligent creature who's a badass fighter, and has a bit of nobility. He still protects people on his island, can show compassion and mercy to people so long as they don't threaten his territory or threaten him directly. Um, Captain Packard, played by Samuel L. Jackson, you could say he's like a secondary antagonist, but he's not evil. He was just trying to avenge his fallen soldiers, and you could also tell that he's trying to get one last glory mission because he's a bit bitter that America didn't finish the war in Vietnam, and they said they just decided to come back home. So he feels that Kong is like the final big enemy that he can have the chance to defeat and prove that he and his soldiers fighting wasn't in vain. So we can kind of relate to him on that, but at the same time, we can see that he gets a bit overzealous and doesn't think things out through, as he doesn't consider that Kong should be spared because he's like the protector of Skull Island. He's not he's not the main threat when it's actually the Skull Crawlers. Speaking of which, I mean the Skull Crawlers are serviceable as antagonists. I mean, they're not going to be the next big interesting monsters like Godzilla has King Ghidorah, or Space Godzilla, or Mecha Godzilla, or Destroya, or whatever. I think it's just kind of like the Mutos. Like, you're not gonna exactly remember them in about a couple of years after. They're just there just to have Kong have something fight, but they're just not gonna be that recognizable after a while. I think what might have helped was that if they were trying to build up that Kong's parents were killed by these skull crawlers, or at least a really giant one. I think they could have tried to play more onto that, like have Kong grieve at the graveside of his parents, and try to have flashbacks of the skull crawlers killing his parents, which would have made their antagonistic relationship between them a bit more impactful, and you would just gotten a sense of how dangerous these were. Also, it's kind of odd that the giant skull crawler managed to kill two of Kong's parents, yet this Kong, albeit with a little bit of help from the humans, was able to take down this skull crawler. But I guess maybe he didn't have a lot of things to use to his advantage against him, so we gotta take those things into account. But all in all, the skull crawlers were serviceable, but I wouldn't expect too much from them. Everybody else, like Tom Hiddleston's characters, were alright. John C. Reilly, was that another character? The guy who played the World War II survivor who remained on Skull Island for about 28 years. He was fine, and his jokes were, I mean, they were alright, but they kind of had a poor timing. I mean, sometimes things need to be a little bit more serious, and I mean, sometimes you gotta have levity to scenes just to to break the tension, so things don't get too serious and too depressing. But it's just they were just ill-timed at times. I mean, sometimes they were fit, and other times it'll just seem odd. Just watch the movie, and you'll get what I mean. Everybody else was alright, we, but let's be honest, we didn't come here for the humans. We came more for the monsters. And if you're interested in seeing some of these monsters and how they interact, you'll get a pretty good job, because this does show the wonders of some of these monsters, whether they are gentle or dangerous. And I felt that they did put a lot of imagination to this. What I do think that they need to do in the future is that they need to focus a little less on the humans and start focusing more on the monsters, and start treating them as this wonder, and actually start making them more like characters, because we need to get them more screen time and development. Like I said, we could have had more of Kong's backstory focused on with the skull crawlers. That way we can get more invested in his story and his pain, and seeing him take down the giant skull crawler that killed his parents would have been much more satisfying. But yeah, all in all, I'd have to say this was a pretty good movie. I did like the spectacle of Skull Island. I did enjoy the fights, and the characters were pretty all right. So, if I were to give this movie a score out of 1 to 10, I'd give it an 8.5. It probably would have gotten maybe a 9 if it taken some of my advice. And in case you're wondering if they have a post-credit scene since they're doing the cinematic universe, yes, they do. And it does tease into Godzilla King of the Monsters, and that I am looking forward to. So stay after those credit scenes. You will not be disappointed. Alright, I'll catch you guys later.